that a woman is worth something when she has a kid.
Yeah.
You know, I was thinking about that, and I'm like, oh wow, I wonder what that would feel like for me if the only way that people thought of me is if
you produce.
Yeah, if I produce, you know, you know, not about.
I'm like a better producer.
So that theme jumped out to me, you know, and also the domestic violence.
Yeah.
You know, and the bleaching cream. Yeah, that was something. You know, when I read that story, I'm like, it's, you know, whenever we talk about bleaching cream, we're thinking about the adults.
Yeah.
You know, okay, this woman is using this cream or whatever. We don't even ever think about what it does to children.
We were thinking about future generations and how we're going to pass on how people think about themselves. I think what really breaks down the power of the way that we kind of classify people by skin color is really examining why we do it in the first place, and what is it about fair skin, where did that value come from, what does it actually mean. And I think that in a lot of these stories, people for so long, it's just the thing to do. They don't really examine it, they don't really say, okay, well, it's better, everyone thinks it's better to be fair, but why? Where did that come from?
Yeah.
You know, and I think once you start to examine the history of it, I think that it loses a bit of its power.
I'm wondering where it came from. Okay, so maybe legacy of colonialism, right? It's, you know, if you're a white person and they had the power, they had all the technology and all that stuff, right? They were viewed as better.
Right.
And why it still persists?
Because we were never healed from it.
True.
I think we were never actually healed from that whole mindset, and in order to be healed, a generation has to heal the next generation, and we were never officially healed.
Yes.
So because of that, it's going on and on and on. People think they're healed, but as a community of brown people, we were never actually healed. And so if you don't develop that internal love that Darlene was talking about, you will succumb to the pressures of society. That whole, that underlying feeling that this particular skin tone is better than the next.
Are you going to say something?
Well, no, just, I mean, agreeing with all of you and just pointing out that it's not even, it is colonialism because this also affects different parts of the world.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to point out and see how you read it, I guess, that this skin color bleaching thing is, you know, I traveled to the Philippines, I traveled to China, and they offered me the creams there too.
Wow.
That if you go to India, there's still bleaching. You know, it goes on in every country beyond just Africa, beyond the U.S. It's, you know, actually the whole idea of, you know, dark skin being the, you know, people, Americans tanning, it came about as a status symbol because those are the people who came back tan were the people who could afford to go on vacations, safaris to Africa and all of that. So it became later on, much later, a status symbol. But throughout the world, people have been bleaching, not just in Africa and all. And, you know, just to tie it into the book, a lot of people read Fairness and they, you know, superficially it is a story about skin bleaching. Yes, but actually, if you pay attention to who is experimented on. And people like to ask me, is this real? It's fiction, people. I don't bleach, but I'm just saying that, you know, it's a story that goes beyond even just the skin.
It's, so that brings me to a question I had. What kinds of reactions do you get from people? All right, so this book came out last year. What kinds of reactions do you get from people as you travel on these stories?
I get all those sorts. It depends on what story you point out. But since we're on Fairness, you know, I said I've been asked, you know, do I bleach? People like they're observing me.
Did you bleach? Is
that
you that was in the story?
My knees are different from the rest of my skin, and sometimes they're like, "You were lighter last time I saw you." Like, it's summer now. There are all these misconceptions. But the thing about it is, you know, I was saying earlier to somebody, a few people upstairs, that, or around the house, I guess,
Yeah.
that there's a lot of shaming going on in just society as a whole. It's not new, but it just keeps going. There are many ways in which we try to shame one another.
Yeah.
And so, skin, for example, I can see it. I tease and I say, oh, I'm born in the wrong time. Back in the day, having my skin would have made me like people treat me nice or whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
But now it's gonna, it's going to change where dark skin, even when I was growing up in Nigeria, there was the whole campaign, Black is Beautiful, which is a wonderful thing,
Yeah.
but everything is wonderful until you start to persecute the other side.
Yeah.
So I think it really is what someone said here is just, why are we doing it? Why do we have to create these categories where like it's either black or white, good or bad, always a judgment, and for me it just feels like we're sort of missing the point if we stick to those kinds of arguments.
I appreciate you kind of giving us more information about what your mind state was, where it was when you wrote the book, and what your personal journey has been. But really, truly, who did you envision as your audience? Does it surprise you that there are males here that are just as engaged and interested in these topics?
When I wrote the collection, when I wrote these stories, I was just a new writer. I had not writing. These stories were written without any intention of publication. They were, like I said, a personal journey. I had stories.
So you thought you were gonna just file them away?
You go to school for writing,
Yeah.
and you think, well, anything can happen.
Yeah.
You don't really believe in. It doesn't feel real.
Yeah.
Or at least for me, it didn't, because is the writing thing is what happens to other people,
Yeah.
and I wanted to write stories,
Yeah.
so I wrote stories, but
Yeah.
whatever would come of them I hadn't even thought of.
Yeah.
My brain was not there yet.
Yeah.
Now when I think about writing, I'm aware of things like audiences, but when I wrote these, I was not thinking who is my audience going to be. So I guess my answer to you is that I'm just happy that people are reading. These issues are real issues, as you all are even pointing out, because sometimes people like to be in denial about the things in this book, and it's good that this is not an audience that is in denial. But I think that my goal was just to write about issues that were on my mind. Sometimes you walk around the world and you are frustrated, and things linger, and you have stories. And I'm not an essayist. I'm not a nonfiction writer. So I analyze and make sense of the world through fiction, and so that's what I did. I wrote stories, and thank goodness they're getting to you, men and women alike, because I think it's just as important for the men to read alongside the women.
Yeah.
And I also think that we women is not about we women can be ourselves regardless of a man who says, well, let me go for all the light-skinned women. It's not. It's more complex than that, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So I mean, to again break it down into just like these binaries is really not effective, I don't think.